welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and today I'm going to be concluding my Disney series here on the channel. I actually do have one more video after this, and that is the review for Strange World. Leading up to Strange World, I decided to rank through every single era of Disney animation, and then afterwards I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to kind of go back and look at some of the live-action reinterpretations and see, maybe now having seen all of the animated films again and rewatching them, will I like these live-action films better? Will I like them less? And then I decided, you know what, I really don't like a lot of these. And instead of ranking them and saying, you know, this one was less bad than this one, which was less bad than this one, you know, instead of just doing that and just dwelling on all the negative, I decided, you know what, let me make a tier list. I've never done a tier list on this channel, but I like tier lists. I like the idea of putting things into different categories based on where you would place them, based on different qualifications. But this prevents me from having to like commit to a ranking of these movies and saying like this is the definitive ranking, because in general, a lot of them, there are some good ones, there are some ones I actually really do enjoy, but in general, I find the live action remakes as a whole to be slightly underwhelming, if not majorly underwhelming. And there are gems, like I said, there are gems, and that's why I do want to do a tier list, because there are some that are going to be higher tier films. But rather than just lumping them all together as one like collective thing, I decided a tier list would be fun to kind of break it up a bit and to just introduce a new format of ranking on my channel and see if you all respond and if you all like it. And if you do, we can keep making tier lists, because tier lists are very fun. And of course, if you want to see the previous videos of me ranking the Disney animated era, you can check those all out right now in the playlist in the top right corner. But right now we're here to talk about live action. So let me tell you how I set up this tier list. So at the top we have the A tier, and A does stand for something, but I'm not going to spoil it just yet, because there is one film that belongs on this A tier that I don't want to give away by naming the tier after them. So when we get to that film, I will of course reveal to you what that A stands for. But for the B tier, we have better than original, and that's pretty self-explanatory. These are remakes that I feel like were genuine improvements on the original, and as I alluded to earlier, that's very far and few between. And then we have C, which is could be better, could be worse. These are movies that I don't think are necessarily better than the originals, but they also could be a lot worse. Mediocre, fairly well done remakes, even though they are a bit unnecessary. Then we have the gray area, and this is for the movies that aren't necessarily remakes. They're kind of maybe sequels, maybe prequels, maybe they're not direct adaptations of the Disney animated films, but they are based off of them, so they are on this tier list, and for that reason I have this gray area. But there are good gray area and bad gray area films. And then the Disney downers, that's your D tier. These are the films that I just don't like, that I don't think are very good, but at least have something unique in terms of setting itself apart from the originals. And then we have Frame for Frame, which is the F tier, and those are failures in the sense that they just basically recreate everything from the original. And then the bottom tier, below F, we have Z, and that is for REMAKES. That is the REMAKES tier, which this tier belongs to one film and one film only. I will not spoil what that film is, even though if you know who directed these films, you kind of know who's going to be in that bottom spot. But I think this film belongs on its own tier, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But let's start off first with the original Disney animated to live action remake, the Rudyard Kipling Jungle Book, that I don't think a lot of people know existed. I didn't until I was doing research for this video. This is an adaptation of the Jungle Book. It's a little bit more of an adaptation of the book than it is the film, but because it was released by Disney, because it still has the same character names, and because there were some beats borrowed, it is technically qualified as a Disney remake. But I am putting it in the gray area just because I don't think it does enough to be recognizably a remake of the original. And honestly, it's not that great an adaptation of the book either. It's just kind of this interesting jungle story that, like, yeah, you should see because it's kind of uniquely odd, but it's not very good. So I'm gonna put it in the gray area, and I'm gonna put it in the bad gray area. Next, we have 101 Dalmatians. This one, I think, you know, the original is not my favorite animated film, and I still think it's better than this one, but this one, the main strength here is Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil. So while it's not better than the original, I think it could be better, but it also could be worse. I think this is a film that is a lot of fun because of Glenn Close's performance as this villain. It's an iconic villain brought to life. I think because of how good she is as the villain, the other characters are sidelined even more. Here, it's a Glenn Close show. It's a Glenn Close masterclass through and through, and for that reason, I really enjoy it, even if I don't necessarily think it's better than the original. 102 Dalmatians. This is going in the gray area only because this isn't a remake of something already existing. This is the sequel to a remake of an animated film. So because it's not an adaptation of an animated film, it's going in the gray area, and I'm gonna put it in the bad gray area just because I really can't remember much about 102 Dalmatians. I think all the memorable moments are in the first one, and yes, Glenn Close is great again, but I think, you know, if I'm gonna go for one, I'm gonna go for the original, so I'm putting it in the gray area, bad tier. Next we have Alice in Wonderland, and this is an example of a film I absolutely do not like whatsoever, but because it is at least different than the original, it takes some strides in being unique and having its own artistic vision. Tim Burton, while I don't love the vision, he still brings something unique to it, so I'm gonna put it in Disney Downer because I don't like it. I think it's a downer. I hate watching it. I don't like the aesthetic. It's muddled, it's gross, it's kind of grimy, but it is different. It is different. It's a different interpretation of the story, so for that, I have to give it props. Next up, we have The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and this one's going in the gray area because, again, this isn't necessarily an adaptation of a film that Disney made. It's a short within a film, being Fantasia, and it's not necessarily having anything to really do with Fantasia either. I mean, it's just really an adaptation on the namesake alone. I do think this one is better than both The Jungle Book and 102 Dalmatians that I ranked, but I still put it in the gray area, bad tier, because it's just not my favorite of these live action reimaginings. It is inventive, it is smart at times. I think it's an interesting idea to kind of make this into a full-length film, but I think because it doesn't have any ties to the original, it's just kind of there for the name of it. And yes, while you have Nick Cage and Jay Baruchel, two actors I really like, I don't think they're necessarily used to the best of their ability. It's not the worst of this crop of films, but it's also, I think, far from the best. Next we have Maleficent, and this one I think is interesting because we're seeing it all from the villain's perspective. It is a remake of Sleeping Beauty, but we're getting it entirely through Maleficent's point of view, and the point of view we're seeing it from with Maleficent, you know, they take a lot of interesting liberties with the story. I think it's a fun watch. I would actually put this alongside 101 Dalmatians in the could be better, could be worse, because I don't think it's better than the original. I don't think it's better than Sleeping Beauty, but it is such an interesting reimagining of the story, and again, I think like 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close, I think Maleficent with Angelina Jolie, she brings so much to that role that just keeps it exciting to watch every time, even though, like I said, not better than the original. Next we have Cinderella, and this one's a little tough for me because I actually really like this remake. It really brings out a lot of interesting underlying character beats that weren't missing from the original. We get a lot more with the stepmother and the stepsisters. We get a lot more with the prince here. That was a big qualm I had with the original Cinderella. Now, I want to put it in the B tier because I do like it so much, but is it better than the original? Am I gonna choose it over the original? Probably not, so for that reason I'm gonna put it in the C tier. That could be better, could be worse, only because I love the original so much. I still will pick that, but I do think it is a really, really well done remake that does bring something fresh to the story. I think the design is really good, the costumes, the sets, it's all so magical. It has a great aesthetic to it. Kenneth Branagh, who we all know from his Shakespearean works, from Thor, from Belfast, he has this great eye for some making things feel real regal and really presentational and spectacle driven while also feeling real at the same time, and that's what's great about this Cinderella, is it feels lived in but still larger than life, and I really like it. Lily James, one of my favorite actresses, and again, I think the theme here with these three movies here on the C tier is that while I don't think they're better than the original, they're great because of the central performances, being Angelina Jolie, Glenn Close, and in this case Lily James, and Cate Blanchett. So I definitely recommend it. It's not better than the original, but it is very darn close. Next we have The Jungle Book, and this is the first one I'm putting at the better than the original tier because I really genuinely do think that Jon Favreau's Jungle Book is better than the original, and that's because this just has a more concrete story. I think there's an actual storyline. They decide to kind of thread all this together and make Shere Khan a more present antagonist and not just some tiger that shows up later in the film. I think the characters are still fun and charming. I think the central performance, the little kid, maybe not the best actor, but again, he's surrounded by such great talent, and the visuals here are just so stunning. I mean, this was really the first live-action remake that really brought people, brought that awareness to people. Like, this is a really good film, and honestly, maybe Disney can make a lot of these and make them successful, and as we see later on, they kind of took the wrong approach, and they kind of went for the more frame-for-frame remakes a lot of the time. But this one I don't think is a frame-for-frame remake. It really expands the story. It feels different than the original while also staying true to the heart and soul of the original. And honestly, if I'm going to go back to watch either one, I think the story here is a little bit more engaging. So I'd pick this one at the end of the day. Next, we have Alice Through the Looking Glass. Again, another one that is in the gray area because it is not necessarily an adaptation of an existing animated film. It is a sequel to Alice in Wonderland, which is the adaptation of that film. So for that reason, I'm putting it in the gray area, and I'm putting it in bad. I think it's a bad film. I think it's even worse than the original, and the original I already have down at the D tier. So that only goes to show how much I dislike Alice Through the Looking Glass. Next, we have Pete's Dragon, and spoiler alert, dun, 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 the A tier is standing for a David Lowery masterpiece. That's right, because Pete's Dragon is going all the way up there at the A tier, a David Lowery masterpiece. I love Pete's Dragon. Now, this one's interesting because it is an adaptation of a pseudo live-action animated hybrid film. So some people would say, well, it doesn't count. It's not a live-action remake of a Disney animated film. Honestly, I get your point, but also I love this film too much that I didn't want to disclude it from this list. It is my favorite. It is the number one, I think. I think it does everything right with a remake. It makes the theme stronger. It makes the story more focused. I think the visuals are better. It's an improvement. There's better aesthetics and creative choices, and I just really love it. I think the direction's smart. It is still a simple story. You know, it kind of borrows a few beats from something like E.T., but the thing is, it's borrowing really amazing beats. I mean, E.T. is a great film to borrow from. Yes, you're never going to be able to capture the magic of E.T. beat for beat, but I think this one comes pretty darn close in that whole idea of the kid who kind of has to find himself as a little bit more alone, dealing with familial problems, and he kind of finds this creature that he befriends and gets close to. It's a really charming tale. I remember actually seeing this before I went off to college in 2016, and this was the last film I saw with my parents before I left for college the next day, and I remember sitting in the theater and just getting overwhelmed with emotion and just sobbing in my seat because, you know, this was the last time I was going to be at the movies with my parents for quite a while, and that was our thing. We would go to the movies almost every week together over the summers when we had nothing to do. I mean, that was our time bonding, was in the movie theater with each other, and for this film to be so family-centric, to experience that with my family and just cry those tears. David Lowery is amazing. I love The Green Knight. I can't wait for his Peter Pan remake. I really think this man should be in charge of, if not all, at least most of these Disney live-action remakes, because he is incredible. Moving on to Beauty and the Beast, and this is the first one I'm going to put in the frame-for-frame tier. I think this is an F tier only because it is pretty much a direct adaptation of the original. There's not a lot changed. Yes, there's an added song. Yes, there's a little bit of a time travel backstory, weird little plot line, but if you remove those two elements, this is basically Beauty and the Beast as we all know it. I mean, it has the same narration at the start. It has the same songs. I'll say it right now. I think the aesthetics in this thing are also pretty ugly. I mean, everything's bogged down in this bluish gray hue that really masks the enchantment that you feel from that original film. Yes, a film can get dark, but it doesn't have to get dull. And I think this film does get a little bit dull. I think there are some saving graces in some of the performances, but I think when looking at this tier list and looking at which category it belongs in, it is an F in the sense that it is a frame-for-frame remake. It is not a successful reimagining of the story. It is a reimagining, but I don't think it's a very successful one because it just kind of borrows the same exact beats. Christopher Robin, I'll say right now, is not an adaptation of Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh directly, so I think it's going to have to go in that gray area, but it is the first film to go in the good gray area. I really like this film. I love these characters so much. To see them live action, I kind of like the idea that they're these little stuffed animals, and you can kind of see that tangibility with them. They almost look a little bit worn out too. It makes your heart hurt, and that's one thing I hold against this film, is that the first half is so sad and depressing, but I do think it ends in such a charming way, such a wholesome way. And I think Ewan McGregor does a great job as Christopher Robin. I think Brad Garrett is an amazing vocal choice for Eeyore. I love that vocal choice. I really do like this film, and while I do think it has its flaws, I don't think it's better than some of the other Winnie the Pooh tales. I think because it is Winnie the Pooh, and because we're getting to see it in a live-action setting, and we get to see them kind of bumbling around London at the end, like, I think it's a lot of fun. And so for that reason, while I think it's in the gray area because it's not necessarily a direct adaptation of the Winnie the Pooh Disney animated films, it is still a fun, like, legacy sequel to these films that we love so much. Next, we have Dumbo, and this may be a surprise. But boom, I'm putting it in better than the original because I really do think this is a better story than the original. The first half of this film plays out more or less the same as the original, and the fact that he gets separated from his mom, he gets drugged up and sees all those pink elephants on parade, and then he learns how to fly. But the problem I've always had with the original is that after he learns how to fly, it just ends. But here, after he learns how to fly, there's this whole extra segment where he then goes and searches for his mom and kind of comes into his own. And I really love that. I love that it gives us that definitive resolution, that happy ending, and it makes it feel like this story has an ending. It has a finish. It doesn't just kind of end at its peak, at its highest heights, if you will. No pun intended, because he's flying. And Tim Burton, I've always really liked his style. I think it doesn't necessarily work for Alice in Wonderland. I think it does here because it kind of gives you those creepy circus vibes. I think there's a creep factor that works in Dumbo that should be present in Dumbo because it is a creepy story inherently. But I really do like this one. I think this one's underrated, and I don't think it's a masterpiece by any means, but I think, honestly, if I want to go back to rewatch something, I think this one has a little bit more to chew on. There's a little bit more to the story, a little bit more fleshing out of the characters, and I like what it has to say about corporations in general too. The fact that Disney is making a film that kind of criticizes Disney, I think that's a bold meta take, and maybe it was intentional, maybe it was unintentional, I don't know, but I really like Dumbo, and I think the elephant's cute as hell. Next up, we have Aladdin, and I'll be honest with Aladdin, at first I almost put it in the frame-for-frame remake because there's a lot of sequences that are more or less the same, but then the more I think about it, the more I think about how much I enjoy some of the added bits. For starters, Will Smith is totally different than Robin Williams, and that just already gives the film a fresher feel. You also have the love story with the genie, which I think is a kind of a fun addition with Nasim Pedrad. I love her in New Girl. I loved seeing her here. And I think Jasmine just gets a little bit more to do with her story. I think she has that really great song that Pasek and Paul wrote. Some people aren't fans of it, but I think, I think it's a fitting choice to have Jasmine get this big, belty solo number because of all the Disney princess films, this one feels more of the prince's film, less the princesses. And here I think Jasmine is given just as much as Aladdin. And I think because of those changes, this is actually a very successful remake. I wouldn't say it's better than the original, but I think it could be better. It could be worse. And I think that's what puts it on the C tier. I think the more I think about this Aladdin remake, the more I like it because I think Guy Ritchie has something. He has an understanding of the source material, but also wants to make it fresh and wants to make it different. You got his classic Guy Ritchie slow-mo action set pieces. You've got a great infusion of a semi-Bollywood-like feel to some of these musical numbers, the way they're set, the way they're staged, and I just think those little subtle tweaks, yes, they don't defer it enough from the original to make it a complete reimagining, but it at least feels like its own unique thing in comparison to other films, which we'll talk about, like we did with Beauty and the Beast, and like we're about to talk about with The Lion King, which, spoiler alert, is a frame-for-frame remake. The Lion King is basically the original, just with animals that are photorealistic, that have no expressions, and I think that's just such a silly choice. The fact that you are animating these lions, you're not even using real lions on set, and you can't make them look like they're enjoying themselves or look like they're sad or look like they're happy. They all just have the same bland expression on their face all the time. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry. It's all the same. And I think that's just such a detriment. I didn't even realize that with Jungle Book. I think Jungle Book and Dumbo both have animals at the center of their film, and they do make them feel expressive and make them feel lively. Whereas here, I just don't get that. And I really don't think there's any scene in this, except for maybe one scene where Nala is standing up to Scar, where I can't pluck it from the original. I think every other scene in this film is directly from the original. So of all the Disney live action remakes, aside from the one that's going to be on the REMAKES tier, I think this is the most unnecessary that we've ever gotten. Next, we got Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. This is going in the gray area because, again, it is a sequel to a remake, so I don't think it's necessarily a direct adaptation, but I'm going to put it in the good gray area only because, again, I think Maleficent is fun as a character. I like Angelina Jolie in the role, and I think the design here is still really nice. It was nominated for an Oscar for makeup. I think it has great makeup, has great effects. I really don't have anything much else to say about it. It's a fine sequel. It's not anything too special, but again, I wouldn't say it's a bad sequel either. Next, we got Lady and the Tramp, and this one hurts because I really do like the original so much, but this is another frame-for-frame remake. I just think it's too much the same as the original. What I will say is I'm going to put it above Lion King just because they at least try to make these animals expressive, but again, the story is just beat for beat the same, so I can't put it any higher. It pains me to do so because I love dogs, I love animals, but the way I'm going off this tier list, it is essentially a frame-for-frame remake of the original, so I can't put it any higher or lower. Next, we got Mulan, and Mulan, you know what? I don't think it's a frame-for-frame remake, but I also don't really like it very much, so I'm unfortunately going to have to make it a Disney downer. I really don't think it improves the story. I think getting rid of the music altogether gave it a more serious vibe, but I don't think it made it a more compelling story. I get there's a little bit of action in there that's exciting. I think the design is fine. I mean, it looks nice. I like the different landscapes, the costumes and stuff, but I think a lot of the Disney charm is missing because you get rid of the songs, you get rid of Mushu, and I'm not saying you needed them in every scene. I don't think you even needed all the songs or all the Mushu in this movie, but it just feels like because you got rid of those, there's just some energy lost that I don't think Mulan has, despite me thinking that it is at least a bold new choice. And I think that's the same to say with Alice in Wonderland. It's not trying to be the original film. It's trying to be different, but I think because it's trying so hard to be different, it fails in some respects. Next, we have Cruella, and this is a pretty good film. I enjoy it a lot. It's basically Devil Wears Prada, but with kind of a darker, sinister twist. I don't love the idea that you're following Cruella and that she is essentially your protagonist in the film, because we know she goes on to kill puppies, so it's like, should I really be rooting for someone like that? Whereas, like, Glenn Close's 101 Dalmatians, it's like, no, yeah, she's still a villain. She's fun to watch, but she's still a villain 100% of the way. Whereas Cruella, I think they try a little bit too hard to make her likable in the wrong ways, but I still think it is a good film. I still like it, and I'm going to put it in the gray area good tier because of that. And again, it's a prequel, so it is going in the gray area because it's more or less inspired by 101 Dalmatians than it is an actual adaptation, direct adaptation of it. But yeah, I think it's a good film. I like Craig Gillespie's direction. I think it's a good enough film to just squeak by and make it on the good tier. And lastly, it should be no surprise, Pinocchio is going on the REMAKES tier for probably the biggest live action failure they've ever made. The fact that it's so recent makes me even more repulsed because it's still so fresh on the mind. And the fact that we have Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio coming out in a matter of weeks, I think only emphasizes the fact that this film just does not work. The thing is, it is essentially a frame-for-frame reimagination of this story. I mean, I would have put it on the F tier because of that alone, but I think the fact is, the changes they do make do not make it more interesting. If anything, they make it worse. Pinocchio, to escape his cage, decides, why don't I lie? And that lie will help my nose grow, and then my nose will grow, and I can reach the key and escape. So now lying has become a superpower for Pinocchio. Now he's able to use his lying to get him out of a tricky situation. Isn't the whole point that he can escape, and that he lies, and that he has to learn from that, and the blue fairy lets him go? What a dumb choice. And that's just one of many choices. I think the ending of this film is the most laughable, and I don't mean to be shitting on this film. I love Robert Zemeckis. I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Forrest Gump, Back to the Future. I like him as a director, but here, it was just such a misfire. Aesthetically, it looks creepy. I don't like the way the doll puppet thing is designed. I think it looks just uncanny valley. I don't like the vocal choices, especially from Tom Hanks and from Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Jiminy Cricket. I mean, he's trying to go for the original from the 40s, but he's going almost too overboard to where it just sounds like Mickey Mouse on cocaine. There are just so many issues with this film, and I could sit here and lay them all out for you, but I don't want to be too negative. I don't want to be a negative Nancy, especially because there are films on this tier list that I like so much, like Jungle Book, like Dumbo, like Pete's Dragon, which I think is just one of the best remakes, period, ever made. But Pinocchio really just misses in almost every direction. I mean, it's almost comedically bad in the fact that, like, the other films, Beauty and the Beast, Lady and the Tramp, Lion King, it's like, oh, what a bummer. Like, you basically just remade the original shot for shot. But here it's like, you remade the original shot for shot, but then you made like one or two bold choices that just make the film implausible. And the ending, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it's one of the most bizarre endings ever to a Disney movie, where it's like you have to make up your own interpretation of what the lesson to this film is. And like, for a film that bases itself so much on identity and the fact that like Pinocchio wants to be a real boy, but he can't get there, and you know, you kind of put it in a modern day lens of people wanting, you know, to be who they are inside, who they feel they are inside, and you know, just the way society kind of pushes back on that. You know, I don't think this is necessarily the right ending for a film that's coming out in 2022 that is addressing identity. I don't know, I just think it's so misguided in so many ways. And yes, the songs are good, but again, like, do I want to sit here and hear Cynthia Erivo sing When You Wish Upon a Star for 5 minutes beautifully if the rest of the film just gives me so much anxiety and agita? Or would I like to just watch the original? Yes, it's not Cynthia Erivo singing, but at least it's going to fill me with some warmth and some joy in my heart. Cynthia Erivo, you are innocent. magnificent. You were amazing in this film, but unfortunately you were given a pretty bad film to be in. I hate being a downer for any of these films, but, you know, I think the tier list kind of speaks for itself, and the fact that the ones that are good, you know, are really good. You know, some of them are better than the original, some of them are David Lowery masterpieces, but all in all, everything else is either, you know, could be better, could be worse. They're either Disney downers, frame for frame remakes, there's REMAKES movies, or they're in this weird gray area, and even in the gray area, there are more bad films than good in that gray area. So I think this tier list taught us, Disney, when you have to remake something that actually needs reimagining. Like Pete's Dragon. Pete's Dragon, the original, isn't that good. So the fact that they remade it and made it great, that's awesome. You know, I wish they would take more films like that. You know, take Atlantis, take Treasure Planet, which I still like, but I know didn't get a lot of great box office buzz or reception. You know, take the films that are lesser appreciated. The Black Cauldron. Take films that are not as well reviewed, not as well revered, didn't make as much money. Reimagine those. Give those a try. Maybe dip into some of the hybrid films like Pete's Dragon. But that's the tier list. That's this video. What do you think? What are some of your favorite live action remakes? Do you think my hot take of having Dumbo this high and maybe having something like Mulan or Beauty and the Beast this low, I mean, how do you feel about that? Let me know in the comments down below what you think. And as always, be respectful, because again, these films are made by people who are trying their best. Yes, a lot of them feel like corporate product, but there are actually directors and writers who have to actually put it on its feet, and sometimes it's not successful, and we have to criticize that as critics, and sometimes they are, and we can celebrate them and watch them and say, hey, give me more Pete's Dragons all the time. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to like, comment, subscribe, it really helps the channel grow. And next week I will finally be bringing you my review for Strange World, the newest Disney animated film. Stay tuned for that. I'll see you next time.